For the Tennessee Titans, they were one of the crazier stories in the last couple of years. And why do I say crazy? Well, let's take a look back at some of their most recent success. 2019 is pretty much where it all began for Tennessee. They went on this crazy Cinderella run as the number 6 seed in the AFC, and nobody believed that they're going to win a playoff game. They're just going to be, let's just whisk them aside. And they were heavy underdogs, but they eventually wound up sending Tom Brady and his talents from New England to Tampa Bay. And then they went on to literally destroy the eventual MVP that year, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. And yes, they were up at one point against Patrick Mahomes in the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. But, they ultimately fell short in that game to the eventual Super Bowl champs. So, yes, 2019 didn't go up to standard with the eventual climax of a Super Bowl appearance for the Tennessee Titans, but crazy, they managed to go on that crazy run to begin with, and at all for Tennessee. Now 2020, they managed to follow up that success with a AFC South title, but unfortunately for them, their first playoff game at home for the first time in many years, they fell kind of flat against the Baltimore Ravens in a revenge game of sorts for Ravens flock. Now for Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill, their quarterback right now, they managed to replace former second overall pick Marcus Mariota, and Tannehill would lead the charge on that Cinderella run. And yes, he had some head scratching throws, but pretty solid and did enough to help win the team some games. Now, of course, the offense mainly runs through their king, the king of kings, Derrick Henry. With his ability to break through tackles, run through defenders, he's pretty much a force to be reckoned with. He's won 2 straight rushing titles, and 2021 seemed to be no different. The Titans, defensively, pretty solid. You got defense that's heralded by Harold Landry, Javon Brown on the pass rush, and you got in the secondary corners Buster Screen and free safety Kevin Byard. Now, during the offseason, they focused around the defense just to improve that area. They added the likes of defensive tackle Danico Autry, linebacker Bud Dupree from the Steelers, and corner Janoris Jenkins. And they also drafted Caleb Farley despite some injury history, and Elijah Molden from Washington. And during the summer, they also traded for Falcons receiver Julio Jones to give Tannehill another option besides A.J. Brown. Now, with these key additions and depth pieces finally in place, for Mike Vrabel and Ryan Tannehill, they at least seem confident in finally getting to that Super Bowl that they nearly had in 2019. But for much of the season, a lot of that confidence, a lot of that hope, was dictated not on just injuries, but also the play on Ryan Tannehill. Now, like I said, Tannehill, he's okay, he's solid, but in 2021 he didn't play all that well, at least not as well as in his first 2 years with Tennessee. But again, not necessarily the worst either. But for half of the time, he didn't prove that spark. He didn't provide I'm gonna change the game on a consistent basis. It was either him scoring multiple touchdowns throughout the game, or it was him handing the ball off to either Derrick Henry or whoever's the running back at the time, and then his team eventually gets into a massive hole because the defense eventually gets tired, and Ryan Tannehill is eventually forced to do something, and he can't do something. So speaking of that defense, championship level one for sure, but again, only could do so much. So, like I said, when neither of one of those things work, whether it's the running game, that can't get going, defense gets tired, Ryan Tannehill forced to save the day, and most of the time can deliver. Now, despite the okayness of Tannehill, Titans were still an efficient team. Got some big victories throughout the season against the Chiefs, the Bills. They swept the season series against the Indianapolis Colts and the LA Rams. So as an AFC top seed, they weren't necessarily scrubs per se. So, and this was despite losing Derrick Henry for half of the season. Now, keep in mind, he was in that game against the Colts, he got injured with that broken foot. And throughout the season, the Titans were rotating through running backs, trying to, well, I don't know, for whatever reason, trying to replicate the success of Henry with Adrian Peterson, Deontay Foreman, and Dontrell Hilliard. Peterson, absolute fail, but Foreman and Hilliard were pretty solid towards the end of the season. And A.J. Brown had another banger year, but unfortunately for Julio Jones, he wasn't available for much of the season because he's just had too many injuries. So in all, the Tennessee Titans clinched the AFC South yet again. Ned the AFC's top seed at 12-5. Got some help for some losses from Kansas City. But the thing was, they didn't really act like it at times. And, during that divisional game against the Cincinnati Bengals, some of those problems started to creep up for the Tennessee Titans, especially when it came to Ryan Tannehill. He really picked a shit time to play a really shit game, throwing for 3 interceptions, letting a Cincinnati pass rush get to him like a lot. Not so much so like the Tennessee defense went on Joe Burrow and that terrible offensive line. I think they went for like 9 sacks in that game. Like, holy shit. But damn, Tannehill pretty much undid what the Tennessee defense did for him, throwing for 3 interceptions, all game changing, mind you. The first one being the first pass of the game, and then literally the 3rd interception is the last pass of the game for the Tennessee Titans. So this game was kind of a huge testament to the point we made earlier. The Cincinnati Bengals, which they did, you take the running game away from the Tennessee Titans, whether it's Derrick Henry or somebody else, and the focal point of the offense, it just becomes nothing. It just becomes absolutely nothing. So overall, the Tennessee Titans went 12-5, got the AFC's top seed, but for what? They're gonna be they're still kicking dirt over that big dud that Ryan Tannehill laid in the playoffs. Now they're gonna be asking themselves, is Ryan Tannehill really our man? And that's what we're going to be asking here too. Is Ryan Tannehill really your man, Tennessee? And unfortunately, throughout that 2021, yes, it's only 1 year. 2020, 2019 were like pretty okay-ish years. But 2021 was like kind of a down year for when it came to the Titans and Ryan Tannehill, despite getting that top seed. So, yes, they must have that question, is Ryan Tannehill really our man? But unfortunately, they can't really do anything because they gave him a fat ass contract. Because I don't know why, they just rewarded him for, oh, thanks for taking us to the AFC Championship game. Here's a fat ass contract for you. And guess what? 2 years later, you're stuck with him. You can't trade him. You can't release him because you're going to be dealt with the fat dead cap hit anyway. So you're stuck with him. So here we are. For the Titans offseason, when they first started, they were minus $7 million in the red, so they had to do some restructuring. They already did something good in extending Harold Landry to a lot and putting him in a long-term situation. So one of their key pieces to the defense already locked up for the future. They also re-signed their kicker Randy Bullock. They also signed a tight end, so they just won their offseason needs in Austin Hooper. Sure, not a glaring success for the Cleveland Browns, but when he was on the Falcons, pretty solid. They also released Julio Jones, so yeah, big bust trade for the Tennessee Titans. And Roger Saffold also got released by the Titans as a cost-cutting measure, and he went on to sign with the Buffalo Bills. Now, some of the other key free agents that the Tennessee Titans had and elected not to keep included Ben Jones, the center, Javon Brown and Rashawn Evans, Buster Screen and Greg Maben, and Dontrell Hilliard and Deontay Foreman. So pretty much the substitute backups for Derrick Henry and Randy Bullock, who just re-signed. So right now they're pretty much $2.5 million under the cap. So they still have to make some room for their draft signings. And speaking of the draft signings and the rest of the free agency, some of the things that they still have to address, I think last season they pretty much addressed the defensive needs. Now this season has to be about offense. This offseason has to be about offense. Because sure, they can go help add inside linebacker because, well, Rashawn Evans and Jaylen Brown Javon Brown, mind you, are on the open market still. So you could try to convince them to get a team friendly deal to come back. But either way, they're still going to need some help in the defensive backfield to either help in the pass rush or, lock it down in the secondary. So, I mean, sure, you can go get some help at inside linebacker, but the main focus should be on the offense because you need someone opposite AJ Brown. You also need some receivers behind whoever's going to, like that depth chart behind AJ Brown and whoever's going to be that number 2 option, because Julio Jones is gone. That experiment failed, and sure, they already got Robert Woods in a trade for a 6th-round pick, but we don't know what he's going to be like coming off an ACL tear. So the Tennessee Titans should go into that 3rd round, or who knows, maybe they might go 1st round for a wide receiver. They need to focus in this draft and maybe in the bargain bin of free agency on netting a number 2 receiver. And they have to fix this offensive line just a little bit because a lot of them are getting a little old per se. Now, in 2021, they were okay, but they struggled a good chunk in pass protection late in the season, and Ryan Tannehill got sacked a lot as a result. Now, they already have several offensive linemen on their roster, but again, who knows? Who knows if they make it on the 53-man roster come this fall. So whether it's they want to find a key piece in the draft and what the rotation will be like, that's something the Titans should consider throughout this offseason. So they mostly have everything they need in place to go out and win a Super Bowl. But the thing is, you have some serious questions about how far you can go with Ryan Tannehill and some other questions, of course. Now, you're fighting against the cap. You're in need of another receiver opposite A.J. Brown and depth behind those 2 receivers. And now the Indianapolis Colts got a little bit better with Matt Ryan in the AFC South. So, yeah, this could get really rough for the Tennessee Titans if they don't make some moves in the draft or in get some bargain bin options in free agency. And if they don't do that, damn, their hopes of defending an AFC South title with Ryan Tannehill, or let alone making the playoffs, it can get rough. It can get rough really quick.